Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone's been able to join our session today on domestic and intimate partner violence and the workplace. I am Lindsay Manuel. My pronouns are she and elle. I work for Women's Equality on the Violence Prevention and Community Partnerships team. So I work in the field of domestic and intimate partner violence and work with community partners for different programs and whatnot. So one thing I do like to let people know before I start is that I am visually impaired, or technically I'm legally blind. I like to share that for two reasons. One, I think it's important for people with disabilities to be represented. And two, I like to forewarn people that I can hear eye rolling, even without videos on. So just so you know. And I'm going to call upon my colleague Matthew to do a little introduction, and he's going to be helping with the tech support today and sometimes potentially telling me which slide I'm actually on. So, Matthew?
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I am the Legal Programs Officer with Public Legal Education and Information Services of New Brunswick. And I'm very happy to be here helping out Lindsay do a little bit of the back-end lifting. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat as well as the Q&A. Both have been unlocked for you. You will notice that your mics and your cameras have been disabled. This is a feature of webinar on Zoom. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. If you would like to ask a question, you'd rather ask it verbally. If you want to just use the raise hand function and let me know that you have a question that you'd rather ask verbally, I can give you permission to unmute your mic. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Lindsay.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt, and thanks for being here. I do appreciate it. So we do have the chat feature open. I might ask some questions throughout this where you can put some responses in the chat. We also have a Q&A feature. If you want to ask some questions anonymously, you can put them in there as well. So first of all, I do want to say that the topic that we're addressing today can be very difficult for some people. We know that approximately 1 in 3 people are impacted by domestic and intimate partner violence. So this might have impacted you personally. And if by chance you ever need to take a break, step away from the computer, get a drink, just take a little pause, please do so. Take care of yourself. If you find that this is triggering and that you need some more support, you will see at the end I've included a number of different resources for domestic violence service providers. And we will also share, for those that want it, share this PowerPoint with you. So we're going to get started, and I decided to start with a video today. It's a very short, just over a minute video, because I want you to hear from a survivor of domestic and intimate partner violence, how it impacted them and their work, just to put us all on the same page of why we're here today.
Three days after our wedding, he hit me. Some days he wouldn't let me go to work. And when I was allowed to go to work, he'd call and he'd threaten me.
We asked workers if they'd experienced domestic violence. 1/3 said yes, and over half of them said it followed them to work.
He'd just slap my face until my ears would ring. I would go into work covered in bruises, and I'd make excuses.
A lot of the workers told us it affected their ability to even get to work, and 10% of them lost their jobs.
I didn't know if I could tell anyone at work. I didn't know if anyone would help me.
We cannot let this continue. The labor movement would not let this continue.
I was lucky. My boss and my coworkers were supportive.
We want to make sure that people like Melissa get the support that they need.
Most of us probably have or have had a coworker who has been through what I've been through. The more people know, the better the chances of helping a woman like me escape their situation.
Okay, so we heard from Melissa and how intimate partner violence impacted her. And I think what was really key in that little clip is when she said, I was lucky. My supervisor and my coworkers supported me. So, despite the fact that she's in a situation that involves domestic and intimate partner violence, she saw the benefit of having an employer and coworkers that were supportive. Generally, domestic and intimate partner violence is fostered in secrecy and shame. People are afraid to talk about it because they're told that they're stupid, they're dumb, nobody will believe you. We need to start to create an environment where we're not blaming the victims and survivors for the violence, but really holding the abusive partners accountable. So, I thought we would do a little bit of test yourself from what you got from the video. So, how many workers had reported experiencing DIPV in their lifetime? So just think about that, what you heard from the video. If you'd like to put an answer in the chat, you can feel free to do so. So we can click once more and that will give us the answer. And it is 33%, 1 in 3 workers. So sometimes we hear people say, well, that doesn't impact my workplace. That doesn't impact people that I know. The reality is, it probably does. We just don't know who it's impacting. So 1 in 3. Let's go to the next question. Okay, for this one, how many people said that they had experienced DIPV in the past 12 months? So was it 1/3, 1 in 10, or a quarter? So this one was 1 in 10 in the past 12 months. So we're not talking about things that have happened in the distant past, childhood experiences or whatnot. These are things that are impacting people today. And I have one more. And that's how many people lost their jobs as a result of the DIPV. So a lot, 10%, 25%, or none. 1 in 10. 1 in 10 victims lost their jobs because of the domestic and intimate partner violence. And we know that sometimes abusive partners use work to control their victims or survivors. We know that sometimes they don't let their partner go to work. They have to call in sick. The impact of them calling the workplace over and over or showing up and being disruptive impacts an employee, and sometimes they are either forced to quit their jobs or are fired from their jobs.
Lindsay,
Yes.
we had a question that came in, someone wanting clarification. Is it 1 in 10 of people who have been victims or 1 in 10 people who lost their jobs are victims?
It is 1 in 10 people that have experienced domestic and intimate partner violence have lost their jobs.
And then there was a follow-up with that. Pardon me. How is the loss of job associated with domestic violence?
It is the fact that sometimes abusive partners use it as a way to control their victims by not allowing them to go to work. It can be distractions, it can be inattention that might cause poor job performance. There's so many things, and we will get into some of those things as we go through this. We'll talk about how it impacts someone at work and also how it enters work and impacts the entire workplace.
There
We're
are
not all,
Oh, I'm
oh,
sorry, please continue.
just going to say, we're not necessarily talking about the violence occurring at work, which sometimes it does, but we are talking about the impact that the violence has on the employee, their coworkers, and the workplace in general.
Okay. This person wanted to clarify. They were wondering, how do we get that data?
So this study was done by in combination with the Labor Congress of Canada as well as Western University. And you will see that there is a reference to it, I think, on the page where we had the video. And you can check out their research as well. Western University has a lot of information on domestic and intimate partner violence in the workplace. They've actually done some training for federally incorporated organizations. So there's a huge amount of work that they have done on the topic. Okay. So we can go to the next slide of why address domestic and intimate partner violence. When you have an employer or when you have an employee that has their abusive partner calling to check up on them all the time. One person said he would call to know when I was at work. He would call to find out when I left work. He would call to make sure I was actually at work. Abusive partners can be very disruptive to the workplace itself by showing up unannounced or unwelcome, by calling, by not permitting their partner to go to work. There are many aspects of it. And we also know that sometimes people don't know what's going on. They recognize that, okay, this person isn't a very good performer at work, but they don't know why. They don't know the context of what's going on with this person. So it does have an impact, not just on the individual, but on their staff. There might be other people that have to kind of pick up the slack. And there are economic costs that we will talk about as well. So if we go to the next slide, there are a couple of objectives for today. I'm not going into anything in great detail. I'm trying to give you a broad view of domestic and intimate partner violence and how it impacts the workplace. If you want more information on it, you can check out our toolkit. And later in the presentation, I give you the website address for that. As well, there's also free online training modules on our website that we have developed, much based on the information that I'm going to give you today, but it will go into it in a little more detail. So whether you want to take the online training or if any of your colleagues or employees want to take the training, it is available and it is free. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to talk about the impact that the violence has on the workplace, not only on the individual, but the coworkers and the workplace itself. I also will touch on some of the rights and responsibilities of workplaces to address domestic and intimate partner violence. I'm also hoping that this will give you more information on how to create a safety plan, a workplace safety plan, to help enhance the safety of somebody that is being subjected to domestic and intimate partner violence. And also to look at some practical tools or tips that you might use in your workplace if there's someone that has come to you for help or that you recognize might need help and support. So we can go to the next slide, and this is really the basics. What is domestic and intimate partner violence? Generally, we're not talking about one-time isolated incidents of a couple fighting. We're really talking about patterns of behavior. Though I should say isolated incidences can also be dangerous. People can be injured and even killed. But generally, when we're talking about the impacts of domestic and intimate partner violence, we are talking about patterns of abusive or threatening behavior that really impacts a victim, their loss of self, their loss of feelings of safety, and their loss of control over their lives. And this can happen in a current relationship, or it can be abuse caused by a past partner. So it can be current or past relationships. It can be in same sex, opposite sex relationships, or relationships between gender diverse people. And it's really when one person uses psychological, physical, sexual, financial abuse to dominate or control someone else. And we also know that domestic and intimate partner violence can happen to anyone. We do know that there are some groups of people that are more vulnerable than others. We know that generally women, those that identify as women and gender diverse people, have significantly higher rates of domestic and intimate partner violence. But I don't want us to forget that men also can be victims of domestic and intimate partner violence. And sometimes for them, it can be they have other barriers that they have to overcome, such as social stereotypes and knowing where to get information and help from. But there are other groups of individuals that we would say are more vulnerable or higher risk as well. And that would include, as I mentioned, 2S LGBTQIA plus people. It includes newcomers and racialized people. It includes Indigenous people, as well as those with disabilities. We know that they all experience higher rates of domestic and intimate partner violence. And one thing about that I want to be clear is that when we're saying these groups have higher rates of domestic and intimate partner violence, it's not because these individuals are weak. It is because there are systemic barriers that they face, that they don't have the same safety and access to the same resources as others. And they're often targeted because they don't have access to other resources. So I do like to make that distinction between a vulnerable population and that it's not that these are weak individuals. Okay. So we can move on to the next slide, I think. Now, I really like this image of the iceberg because generally when people think of domestic and intimate partner violence, they think of physical violence. We can see it. We can see someone's bruise. We can see someone's broken bones. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other forms of violence that are accompanying that, that it is very comprehensive. Unfortunately, very comprehensive. There's so much going on. And I do just want to briefly go through the different types of violence that I want to make sure everyone understands. So physical violence, as I said, the ones that people see, the ones that are generally punishable under the Criminal Code of Canada as assault or murder or threats with a weapon. It can be hitting, punching, burning with a cigarette. Now, one thing we need to remember with physical violence, we need to pay attention to the words we use when we're talking about it. Sometimes we'll talk about it like, oh, they hit her with an open hand. Does that make it any better that it's an open hand rather than a closed hand? Or, well, it was just a push. Well, we need to remember that that push could be down the stairs. That push could be into a wall. And sometimes we think about some of these things as rather juvenile behaviors, such as pulling hair, but they can have very devastating consequences. There was a New Brunswick woman who moved to Florida, and she had a partner there who was apparently quite abusive. She had gone out for a birthday with her friends. She came home late. He was mad. He grabbed her hair, and when he did it, he jerked it, and it turns out it damaged her spine. He threw her into bed and left her there, and she didn't get any medical attention. Her mother was worried about her and couldn't contact her and came down, and she found her daughter in bed in quite a serious situation. This woman now lives in a special care home in Nova Scotia as a quadriplegic because of something what we might think of as juvenile as pulling the hair. There's another aspect of physical violence that I think we should be talking about and probably should be talking about it more, and that's head injuries. We know that victims of domestic and intimate partner violence suffer repeated beatings to the head. We need to recognize that that can cause brain injuries and concussions. We talk about it in the sports world. You know, when Sid the Kid or Sidney Crosby had a concussion, everyone wondered when he could play again, what's going to happen, how's he doing? We need to pay attention to head injuries and victims of domestic and intimate partner violence because many don't receive the treatment that they probably need. There's impacts of head injuries on them, on their memory, on them being able to tell their story. So that can impact their credibility if it's going through a judicial process. So we need to pay more attention to head injuries and the treatment and make sure victims do get the treatment. So then there's emotional or psychological violence as well. We hear sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Well, that's not true. When someone is told day in, day out, they're stupid, they're ugly, they're dumb, you're lucky you have me. You're fat, you're ugly, nobody else will love you but me. You're really lucky you have me. We often see it in kind of young teens as well. The um, the jealousy, the, oh, well, he texts me 15 times a day or 20 times a day because he can't stand to be apart or away from me. We see it in love bombing, those relationships that happen really, really quickly. But we've also learned that from Disney movies, that there's whirlwind romances. It's so wonderful, and they live happily ever after. But in reality, sometimes abusive partners use love bombing to gain control of their victims, to isolate them from others, that they are so focused on the relationship, they will do anything to make that relationship work. And they become isolated from friends and family that may be a good support for them. There are other aspects, such as criminal harassment. We generally know that as stalking. We know that criminal harassment or stalking behaviors increase the risks to victims, particularly for domestic homicide. So we need to pay attention to criminal harassment when someone's always monitoring someone, when someone's following them. And it's so easy to do now with apps like Find My Friends and when people check in on Facebook and all of those things. Much of that lets abusive partners know where their partners are so they can monitor them. Financial abuse. when one controls whether someone goes to work or what happens with their paycheck or child tax benefit, whatever it is, when someone uses finances to control the other partner. The big thing about financial abuse is that it can really limit people's options. If you don't have control over your own finances or savings account, or if you're not allowed to work, or someone has ruined your credit, how easy do you think it is to leave an abusive relationship, maybe get an apartment, have the damage deposit and first month's rent, be able to have good credit to be able to get power hooked up, all of those things? Financial abuse makes it much more difficult and really limits people's options. We also have spiritual abuse. I like to include this one because many people who are spiritual, whether it's religious or another type of spirituality, much of their strength comes from that spiritual belief. And the people who are their supports are often involved with that spiritual belief as well. So if a partner forces someone to leave their religion, leave their spirituality, and do something else, or forces them to join another religion, or makes fun of their religion or spirituality, it can have an impact by isolating people. And it really impacts their self worth, their internal strength, because their beliefs are being belittled. And then there is sexual violence. Sexual violence probably occurs in the context of domestic and intimate partner violence more than we ever would know. It is very difficult for people in general to disclose sexual violence. And then when it's by someone who's supposed to love you, sexual violence can include aspects of forcing someone to have a child or interfering with their contraception. It can be making them watch pornography. It could be making them have sex with other people. There's so many aspects of it, but it is any form of unwanted sexual um, sexual contact. Okay. We can go to the next slide. So one aspect of domestic and intimate partner violence that we're starting to talk more about is coercion and control, or coercive control. And actually right now there's a private member's bill that has gone through the second reading in Parliament, adding an offense of coercive control to the Criminal Code of Canada, because it is very impactful for people when someone is exerting coercion and control over them, because it's not always physical violence and it's not always threats. There's so many other aspects to it. And it's also very difficult to identify it by an incident. When there's a specific incident, it's a little bit easier to identify domestic and intimate partner violence. But with coercive control, it is, again, that pattern of behavior. For instance, if I said that my husband doesn't let me go to church, some people might think, well, is that really a big issue? You know, what does it mean he doesn't let me go to church? Well, if you explore it a little bit more, you might find out that last month I tried to go to church and he assaulted me because I was leaving the house without his permission and going to church. And then 2 weeks ago, I wanted to go again. And he said, remember what happened last time. So now he doesn't even have to say anything to control me. He just needs to let me know that no, you're not going to church. Because I know the consequences, what will happen if I do go to church. And within coercive control, it's really when someone uses it to control another partner. But it's not always that physical aspect. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at some other methods. So I said it's not always physical or threatening. It could be part of that love bombing that I'd mentioned when a relationship starts really quickly and the victim or survivor has invested everything they have into that relationship and will do whatever they need to do to maintain that relationship. We also know that it can include gaslighting. So we hear gaslighting used in so many contexts right now. And just as a little bit of history, gaslighting actually, the term came about, I think it was in the 40s. There was a stage show, a stage play, and then a movie called Gaslighting or Gaslight. And what it was a husband was slowly dimming the gas lights in the house, but telling his wife that no, nothing has changed. You must be crazy. Everything's normal. I don't know what you're talking about. And then he would dim them a little more, and she'd be like, is it getting darker? No, it's not. And gaslighting really makes someone question their perceptions. Sometimes it makes them question their own sanity. We sometimes hear people say, oh, I think I'm going crazy because they are questioning their perceptions of reality. Sometimes it has to do with children, that you're a bad mother, you're a horrible mother, the kids aren't doing well in school, that's all your fault. Or they convince them that they can't make any decisions on their own, that they need their partner to be able to help them make decisions. We see gaslighting kind of on a societal level as well, that abusive partners, they don't necessarily abuse their partners in public. They are really often quite strategic and charming in public. And so sometimes people might say to a victim, oh, you're so lucky. Your partner is great. They take you out for dinner, they hold the door open for you, they're attentive, all of these things. And then the victim is thinking, what's wrong with me? If my partner is so wonderful that everyone thinks they're great, what is wrong with me? I must have misinterpreted things. And sometimes they use flattery. Oh, you're so beautiful. You don't need to wear any makeup. Oh, you're so beautiful. I don't want other people looking at you. You're so beautiful. Like, I want that beauty just for me. So don't wear any makeup or don't wear revealing clothing. And that's how they start to exert their control over their partner. Because nobody on the first date says, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're lucky you have me. People wouldn't continue on with that relationship. Whereas the abusive partner, really grooms the person, compliments them, loves them. And then once they have them in their control, they often start to use violence to maintain that control. Okay. How are people doing? I know I'm going through things quite quickly, but if you have any questions or want to add any comments, feel free to do so. So we can go to the next slide.
Lindsay, so far everyone seems to be doing great. One person said they're doing well, and this is very informative.
Wonderful. I'm very glad. And I will somewhere around 4, I will try to give you a couple minutes for a bio break. So you might have to remind me of that, Matthew,
No
because
problem.
sometimes I forget. Okay. So, why address issues of domestic and intimate partner violence? Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and you can just click to have those pop up. Perfect. Thank you. So, when we're looking at this, we need to recognize that domestic and intimate partner violence is a societal issue. This exists regardless of whether or not we want to talk about it. We have started talking about it more, probably due to the pandemic. We often heard of it called a shadow pandemic, that it was also occurring. We know that elements of the pandemic made things even more dangerous for victims and survivors because everyone was forced to stay at home, sometimes with abusive partners. So we need to recognize that this is a societal problem, and domestic and intimate partner violence is one of the most significant triggers for violence in the workplace. So we know that sometimes abusive partners come into the workplace, whether they are targeting their partner, whether they are targeting another employee that works there because they're angry with them for some sort of perceived betrayal, that maybe they think someone's flirting with their partner. Maybe they think that someone's withholding information from them. So it could be violence against their partner, or there could be a risk to other employees as well. We also know that one of the big factors is that abusive partners generally know where their partners are during work time. Between 8:15 and 4:30, I'm generally at Marysville Place. My partner knows where I am all the time. If by chance I was in a transition house or another safe housing place, that physical location generally is kept confidential. But if I'm going to work, my abusive partner knows how to find me at any time. And how many people can afford not to work? But there are things we can do to help reduce that risk. We also know that many people have critical information about domestic and intimate partner violence. You know, friends and family know, police know, coworkers also know when things are going on. So if we go to the next slide. So there was a study looking at, it, I believe it was domestic homicide situations, when they asked all of the people in their life, did you know something was going on? Sometimes it's hard for people to say exactly what was going on, but many people knew something was going on. And if you look at this, we can see that 33% of coworkers knew that something was going on. And when you think about it, we're at work generally for 8 hours a day. I probably spend more time with my colleagues than I do my partner. So often they get to know us. They get to know our behaviors, and they also get to know when things maybe aren't quite right. So we need to look at coworkers and workplaces in general as potentially a safe place for somebody to access resources. Might even just be to access a number, to call someone that can do some safety planning with them or something like that. But we need to recognize that 33% of coworkers know something's going on. And I'm not saying that to blame coworkers for not doing something. I'm saying that as a potential to be able to provide more information and education to workplaces, but also because the aftermath that people do often feel guilty and wish they had done something. But how can they do something when they don't know what they should be doing or what they can be doing? And in New Brunswick, there is a domestic violence death review committee. And one of the recommendations that came out of that committee is more training and knowledge for workplaces because they can be a source of support and information for victims of domestic and intimate partner violence. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So 80% of people that have been victims of domestic and intimate partner violence has said the violence has impacted their work performance. We know that there's absenteeism and poor work performance, that the violence that impacts victims. And when I say absenteeism, I should also say presenteeism, because sometimes we know that victims and survivors are absent from work, whether it's because their abusive partner prevents them or is an obstacle to them going to work, or they might have bruises and are feeling sick or whatnot and might not go to work. But also presenteeism. Sometimes they might be there in body, but maybe they're not in mind because they are going through hell at home. And that is often on their mind that, oh, when I get home, what's going to happen? If I don't do X, Y, Z right, what's going to happen? So sometimes they may be distracted at work. And not because they just don't want to pay attention, but because they are being subjected to domestic and intimate partner violence. We can go to the next slide. Now, it impacts workplaces in so many different ways as well. So it can impact other colleagues. So with absenteeism and presenteeism, that maybe somebody's work performance has decreased. So there might be other employees that have to pick up the slack. If they don't know what's going on, they might be resentful. And they're like, oh, so and so never shows up and I have to get their work done. It can impact the morale of the workplace. Overall, it can impact the productivity, not only from that one individual who may be less productive, but if it's impacting the other colleagues and creating more conflict or more toxicity in the workplace, it can impact the productivity. So I talked about poor morale. We talked about the increased risk to other employees, that the other employees could be the target of the abusive partner as well. They could also just feel intimidated by the other partner, because by the abusive partner, because they see how they treat their coworker. And it can be very frightening for people, particularly when one doesn't know maybe how they could intervene. Okay, and the victims themselves may feel less safe. They often understand when things are escalating and getting worse. They might not feel they can trust their colleagues, not because their colleagues are untrustworthy, but sometimes abusive partners are incredibly charming and charm their coworkers. And they might send flowers, they might send candy, they might do X, Y, Z, when really they're actually doing that to control the victim more, to be able to keep tabs on them more. So it is can be very dangerous. Now, if we go to the next slide. So, there are lots of reasons, and there's some financial reasons that I'll get to in a moment, but domestic and intimate partner violence also can have very dire consequences. There have been domestic homicides in New Brunswick, and I'm going to introduce you to two um, two what we call silent witnesses. These are two women that were killed in acts of domestic homicide. And these two women in particular were killed in relation to their workplace. So we can click the next slide, and one more. And then perfect. Now we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to ask Matthew to introduce you to both Elda Armstrong and Rachel Cleghorn, two New Brunswick women who were killed in acts of domestic homicide. And this can be very emotional for some people, so I'll just warn you of that. Okay, Matthew.
So Elda Armstrong from St. John, New Brunswick, was shot by her husband on July 12, 1987, in the parking lot of her workplace. She died 6 days later on her daughter's 19th birthday. Elda's husband abused her for many years. In the 1970s, she fled from him with her young children. After tracking her down in Vancouver, they reconciled and later moved to California. The abuse worsened, and Elda tried repeatedly to get away. Over the years, her husband persistently pursued her, eventually back to New Brunswick. He often found the family through school records. He was charged with first-degree murder, convicted of manslaughter, and received a 10-year sentence, of which he served 4 years.
Thank you, Matthew. And Rachel Cleghorn.
So Rachel Cleghorn from St. Stephen, New Brunswick, was killed on September 4th, 1981, as she walked through the parking lot of the tuna plant at Bayside, where she worked. Rachel was about to start the midnight shift of picket duty when her estranged husband, who had been waiting in his truck, approached and shot her twice, close range with his rifle. Rachel was dead by the time medical assistance arrived. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for second-degree murder. Rachel was the mother of 10 children and raised one grandson as well.
So these are just two examples. We know there are more examples. I'm sure many of you had seen in the media about the woman killed at the marine supply store in Pointe-Sapin. She doesn't yet have a silent witness, which are red life-size wooden silhouettes you can see on the screen. And they all wear a shield that talk about not only their death, but also their life, who they were, what makes them the loved ones to many people. So it can have dire consequences. I'm not saying that every situation of domestic and intimate partner violence turns into homicide, but I can say that New Brunswick has one of the highest rates among the provinces for domestic homicide and one of the highest rates of police reported domestic violence across Canada of the provinces. So we need to address the issue. It was a recommendation of the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee, which does look at domestic homicides, looks at the risk factors, and looks at ways we can make sure it doesn't happen again. It's not about blaming, it's about finding ways to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I will tell you that there are, and unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly how many silent witnesses there are now. There's probably 29 silent witnesses in New Brunswick, and that's women that were killed after 1980. But their silhouettes have been created, but there are over 40 women in New Brunswick that have been killed in acts of domestic homicide. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, now, if all of the social reasons, all of the emotional reasons, all of the fact that many of us have friends and family that probably have been victims of domestic and intimate partner violence, whether we know it or not. There's also another reason for businesses to get involved. It's kind of the dollars and cents of it. There are financial implications for domestic and intimate partner violence and the impact that it has on the workplace. So, the cost of domestic and intimate partner violence in Canada is $7.4 million. And this was a figure, I can't remember quite what the year was. It might have been 2008. So we know those figures would have gone up by now. And out of that, 220, or that's $220 per Canadian. But at least 12% or $890 million is related to third-party costs, which includes costs to employers. So not only is that costs in loss of productivity, but that's also costs in increased use of employee benefits. So there are great costs to domestic and intimate partner violence. So, and other costs are costs to our healthcare system, our justice system. They are costs for future earnings or costs for children who are impacted by domestic and intimate partner violence with their life trajectories being very different from children who haven't been exposed to domestic and intimate partner violence for both education and employment and their levels of salaries. And so in New Brunswick, it would be 165 million and $20 million would be in employment and other third-party costs. So if it's not just the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do financially to address domestic and intimate partner violence and make sure that we have healthy and safe workplaces. And we do know that healthy and safe workplaces are more productive workplaces. So we need to look at those costs. Now, okay, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, now I'm going to go through the next couple of slides quite quickly, and it's about some legislation and some rules in New Brunswick about domestic and intimate partner and sexual violence. So I'm wondering if many people here know that there was a new leave added to the Employment Standards Act. I want to say it was in 2018, and it's domestic, intimate partner, or sexual violence leave. And that is leave of, it could be 10 days intermittently, along with up to 16 days consecutively, or 16 weeks consecutively, for victims of domestic and intimate partner violence to be able to take that time off. For some, it might be to deal with legal issues, might be to deal with police, could also be to find a new residence, a safer residence. It could be for medical or psychological issues or any other reason related to the domestic and intimate partner violence. There are a number of different, if we go to the next slide, there are a number of different different reasons people can list. This does not require any other form of verification, but for the employee telling their employer, I'm taking domestic and intimate partner violence or sexual violence leave for one of the reasons that are listed there. Now, one of the important things to know is that the first 5 days are actually paid leave. The rest of it is unpaid. And in reality, not all victims of domestic and intimate partner violence are able to go up to 16 weeks without pay. But what it does, it really provides job security that if someone needs to take time off, they can come back to their same job or at least at the same level of their job. So that is under the Employment Standards Act, and the employment standards do have a great fact sheet called Other Employment Standards Leaves, I believe it's called, and there is a link to it there. So it provides a little more information. So we can go to the next slide, which is about the Occupational Health and Safety Act, where there were amendments made to their general regulations, and that was in 2019. And again, I'm not going to go into this because WorkSafe NB has a lot of information on their website, lots of practical tools and whatnot that can help people. But sexual violence, harassment, domestic and intimate partner violence were all included in the definitions of violence in these regulations, general regulations, and also now requires employers to include domestic and intimate partner violence and the other forms of violence when they are doing violence assessments for their workplaces. So we can go to the next slide. And this is the one on the Occupational Health and Safety Act, I believe. And if we go one more slide. Okay, when we give you the PowerPoints, there is some more information in the slides. And WorkSafe New Brunswick really has some great information. Oh, actually, I just remembered that I think it follows this slide. So these are some things for you to ponder. Did you know about domestic, intimate partner, sexual violence leave? Did you know that there were changes to the Occupational Health and Safety Act? Just to make people start to think about, okay, what do I need for my workplace? And we have, not that there have been a lot of victims and survivors taking leave under the Employment Standards Act, but when they have tried to do so, sometimes their employer didn't even know that it existed because it is relatively new. So if we go to the next slide, this is some of the information that WorkSafe NB has, and it's about whether you have a workplace of over 20 people or under 20 people, what your requirements are to do a risk assessment for violence. We can go on to the next slide. Here you can see this is actually the website to find the information. And if you go one more slide, you can see their guidelines for best practices. And one more slide, I think. Yes, so there is one of their guidebooks that you can actually go to as well to get some really detailed information about the requirements for your workplace. Okay. And I'm sorry that I've gone through that really quickly, but it's really Work Safe New Brunswick's kind of shtick. They're the experts on that. You can call them and ask some questions as well, but they're the ones that will deal with that. So I'm thinking, okay, that we are going to take a 5-minute bio break. So if everyone wants to grab a coffee, have a bio break, come back for 5 after 4, that would be perfect.
Great, thank you, Lindsay.
Okay. I think we're to 5 after. I hope everyone made it back. So I think we're going to go ahead here, Matthew. Okay, so we're going to talk about how domestic and intimate partner violence can enter the workplace. We can go to the next slide. So, would you even notice if it's entered your workplace, or would you notice the indicators that somebody has been a victim or survivor of domestic and intimate partner violence? And we're going to talk about some of the things that you might notice, the things you might see, that you might hear. If anyone wants to write in the chat what they think they might see or hear to be able to identify that it's a situation of domestic and intimate partner violence, feel free to do so. And in the meantime, we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to start talking about some of the indicators. Now, these aren't all the indicators, but these are some things that you may notice. I might not talk about them all, but again, you will have this PowerPoint. So you might actually notice people being harassed on the phone. Whether it's their work phone or their cell phone, maybe hear the beep of text coming in constantly. Maybe you can tell that the person that's receiving those isn't very happy. Maybe you can hear them say on the phone, "You can't call me at work. I'm going to get in trouble." All of those things. So you may actually recognize that someone is being harassed. There also could be fluctuations in their quality of work, maybe for no apparent reason. But think about why they might have that fluctuation in the quality of work. Maybe they're worried about what's going to happen when they go home. Maybe they know that they've had a fluctuation in their quality of work, or maybe they know they haven't been as productive. They might be worried about their job. There's lots of things that could impact that with the job performance, poor concentration. They might be making more errors. They might be slower. They might be really tired because their home life might be constantly walking on eggshells or constant fights or constant hypervigilance of what's going to happen. And they might not be sleeping well at all. There could be some fear. They might be afraid to go home. They might be afraid to be at work. But sometimes you can tell when someone's exhibiting fear. They might worry about losing their job. Um, they might not seem so pleased when maybe a gift arrives at work. Their abusive partner might send them flowers. Are they sending them flowers because they're apologizing for the beating that they inflicted the night before? Or are they sending them flowers because they're sending the message that I know where you are? We're not sure, but when someone doesn't seem happy about getting a gift from their partner at work, it makes you think, I wonder what's going on. They could have more absences from work, particularly if their partner calls in sick for them. That is a red flag there. That most times, if we're sick, we contact our employer, not our partner. And then unexpected disruptive visits from the partner. And so that could be, oh, they're just dropping by at lunchtime, or maybe they come there every day at lunchtime. Maybe they start chatting up other people. Maybe they go in there to find out information. Did so and so go out for lunch with somebody? Were they here all day? Did they leave early? XYZ. They might be there for a number of reasons. Okay, if we go to the next slide, there's some more indicators.
Or Lindsay, we had a question from someone actually.
Sure.
They want to know, quote, if the spouse tries to log into your email account to monitor your location from that account, is that considered as stalking? And does it fall under coercive control acts?
Probably yes
Yeah,
for
yeah.
everything. Excuse me. Yes, it could be one way that the partner is trying to monitor them. And we know, like I said, there's so many apps that people can use. There's also so many ridiculously simple ways people have used to monitor their partners. One way that shocked me was with the flip phones. So at one point, everyone probably had a flip phone. I'm probably aging myself there, but you can set those to answer automatically and have the ringer off. And so abusive partners would hide that maybe in the dash of a car or maybe somewhere in a house or an apartment. And they can call in and listen to their partner anytime. And so it's really contributes to that idea of gaslighting. The partner wonders, like, why, how can they know everything that's going on? This person really is much more powerful than I ever will be. I might as well just acquiesce. There are things that change voices on the phone. We can spoof numbers now. There's just a lot of ways. And with smart houses now, uh, many people don't know that they should change the passwords to any of those type of security cameras they may have in their house because other people can log into them and watch them. They If they have things like lights that are connected to a smart hub, or if the heat is, when you have someone that's turning on and off the lights, cranking up the heat and turning it down, it really starts to mess with someone. And it's very easy for people to use um, technology to do that. And as for coercive control, absolutely, that can be one method. There are so many different ways of someone exerting coercion and control over someone. It's really hard to say, yes, this is it and this isn't it. But it's just kind of that overall pattern of behavior. But sometimes it's hard to put words to it. Okay. So other indicators, low self-esteem. Often victims blame themselves for the abuse. If I weren't so stupid, if I had supper on the table at the right time, if I was a better wife, if I was a better partner, if I was a better parent, all of these things, they really blame themselves when we might know it's not their fault, but they don't. So they might have that lower self-esteem. They might be showing anxiety. They might have physical symptoms. We know that often victims of domestic and intimate partner violence have more hospital or doctor visits because they have physical symptoms, whether it's headaches, whether it's trouble with their digestive system and whatnot. Um, One of the other big ones is inappropriate clothes for the season. So sometimes we will see people wearing turtlenecks and it's summer. Or they might have sunglasses on inside. They might have long sleeve shirts on or long pants. And sometimes that is to cover bruises. So if someone is wearing unseasonable clothing, it could be an indicator that there may be um, physical injuries that they're covering up. And I say these are indicators. Any one of these things could mean something else as well. But they're kind of that invitation for us to think, is this person okay? Should I ask? Should I see what's going on with them? It doesn't mean just because I'm wearing a turtleneck in the summer means I'm a victim of violence, but it could mean it's kind of that invitation that maybe I should ask. and see how someone is. So they may feel humiliated or ashamed, particularly if the abusive partner comes in or if they're hiding injuries. Sometimes they appear to be trapped in the relationship. Sometimes they appear resigned that this is my lot in life. This is as good as it gets. There are many different things. Sometimes they're not able to participate in workplace social activities, and that's for a number of reasons. One, their abusive partner may not let them, and two, they may want to distance themselves from their coworkers because they're afraid their coworkers will know what's going on. Maybe they're embarrassed by what's going on. They also might want to prevent their abusive partner from participating in some of those social activities because they're embarrassed. Okay. And they may mistrust other staff if the staff are giving out information to the abusive partner, which sometimes we don't think of it. If someone called our office and said, "Oh, is Lindsay in?" Generally, our admin would say, "Just one moment, I'll put you through." Or, "No, she's not here right now, she's at a meeting," or whatnot. But if I'm someone that's in an abusive relationship, that could be very concerning information to give to someone, where I am or the fact that I'm not there. So we want to pay attention to those things. Now, if we go to the next slide, I want to touch on some what I call red flags. Now, these are risk factors. Anytime we know that there could be domestic and intimate partner violence, it's serious. But these red flags are actually risk factors for domestic homicide or serious assault. So if you know that there's intimate partner violence and some of these things are present, that lets us know how serious this is. That this isn't just, okay, maybe we should do something. This is, we need to do something because someone's life may be at risk. So if the abusive partner owns a gun, that's dangerous. We know that often guns are used to threaten, control, and in many cases, kill victims of domestic and intimate partner violence. Unemployment is another risk factor for the abusive partner. If they are unemployed, then that could escalate the risk. If they use choking or strangulation, 50% of women that were killed or almost killed by their abusive partners were choked or strangled by their partner first. 50%. That's very high. And in cases where women weren't killed by their partner, it was something like 10%. So when there's choking or strangulation, and sometimes you will see marks on someone's neck that will indicate that, or you see above their eyelids, they have kind of tiny little red dots that is the petechia, that the burst capillaries, or on the back of their neck. There are often indicators of choking or strangulation, and often victims don't get treated for that, but it is very serious and it should um it should result in a visit to, if it happened within the week, emergency or some kind of health professional, because that actually increases the risk of stroke and death after that as well. So someone should get treated. So if the abusive partner forces sex, so sexually assaults their partner, if they use drugs or alcohol excessively, if they threaten to kill their partner, even if she says, oh, he doesn't mean it, if someone threatens to kill someone and we're talking in the context of domestic violence, it's serious because that's not something we joke about. It's one thing if someone says, oh, I'll kill you if you do that, ha ha ha, and it's not in the context of domestic violence. But if it is, it lets us know there's a risk factor there. I had mentioned stalking or criminal harassment before. I think it's almost double the number of women that were killed were stalked before they were killed. When the partner is extremely jealous. And with that, we might be talking a little more about what's on the far end of the continuum of jealousy. You know, that I go to the grocery store and they say thank you to the person that bags my groceries. When I get out, my partner grabs my arm and say, why were you talking to them? Are you having an affair with them? What's going on? That's not reasonable. But when they have that excessive jealousy, and often there's violence involved with that grabbing the arm, pushing someone, hitting someone, as well as the jealousy. When someone threatens suicide, when the abusive partner threatens suicide, we know that cases of murder suicide, we have some of the highest numbers in New Brunswick for murder suicide. So when an abusive partner is thinking about suicide, we know that escalates the risk to the victim. And when the violence is either getting worse, so what might started as, hitting now becomes hitting to the head or broken bones, that the actual violence itself is getting worse, or that it's occurring more often. So what might have been occasionally before is happening on a more regular basis. We know that increases the risk. Now, one of the riskiest times for a victim of domestic and intimate partner is on pending or actual separation. So many of us want to tell people, oh, you've got to leave them. You've got to leave them. This is dangerous. It is dangerous for someone to be in an abusive relationship. But we need to recognize it's also dangerous, probably the most dangerous time in the first month to 3 months when a victim leaves their partner. That's when the majority of domestic homicides have happened. We need to make sure that there is safety planning in place, that if they leave their partner, that they don't tell their partner that they're going to leave, that they leave and go to a safe place, that there's a number of things that we need to make sure victims and survivors know to be able to help enhance their safety. So, although we want victims to leave, we need them to be prepared and they need to do it in as safe a way as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of how the violence may enter the workplace. So, with this, you look at the abuser. The abuser spends time contacting staff members to find out what the victim is doing. How does the victim feel? So they don't trust the coworkers because they inform the abuser. So now they have more fear for their safety. How does that impact the other employees? So other employees, they don't know what to do. They don't know what information they can reveal. They don't know if they should, if they shouldn't. They're concerned about their own well-being and safety. And it's really uncomfortable when it's not addressed. It's kind of that elephant in the room. There's something going on, but I don't know what I can and cannot do. And then how does that impact the employer? So the productivity may decrease. There could be increased conflicts between employees. and they can be concerned about their safety. So there are impacts. There's one more example on the next page when an abuser is really jealous of the victim's coworkers and they show up at work. So it could potentially be dangerous. It could be anxiety inducing for me as a victim that my partner is coming in and because they're jealous that maybe I had lunch in the staff room with a couple of other people. They want me to be isolated. So my anxiety might be increased. I might avoid interacting with colleagues. I'm afraid of losing my job because I see it as I'm the problem. I could display symptoms of anxiety, headaches, ulcers, unexplained pain. And how does that impact other employees? The fear of being accused by the abuser. They may distance themselves from me as the victim because they don't know what to do. They don't want to get involved. They want some space there. So that might make me feel even more isolated. Um, they could be afraid of being in danger. So, an employer, they have to address the safety issues. If an abusive partner is coming in and possibly threatening or intimidating someone else in the workplace, whether it's their partner or another employee. Um, so must address the safety issues and there could be increased absences due to illness. Because again, going through or being a victim of domestic and intimate partner violence, they often have more health issues because they just don't feel well. Whether it's physical injuries, whether it's emotional, there's huge challenges. And it can have a negative impact on the relationships between employees. So sometimes the abuse might kind of stay at home, but it still has an impact. And sometimes the abuse actually comes to the workplace and can directly impact other employees. Okay. So if we go to the next, okay, here we are. Okay. So sometimes people don't know what to do because they're worried. Am I being nosy? Should I mind my own business? I am afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm afraid I'm going to make something worse. So, to address that idea of am I being nosy? Are you inquiring because you want to spread this information around? Are you inquiring because, oh, I'm just curious? You're probably inquiring because you're concerned. And if you have a reason to be concerned, then you have a reason to be involved. Should I mind my own business? There were many things in the past that we minded our own business about. We used to mind our own business about child abuse. We used to mind our own business about drinking and driving. This isn't something that we should ignore and think it will go away. And really, those that are worried that what if I say the wrong thing? We can always apologize for saying the wrong thing. You know, we say the wrong thing all the time, or maybe not the best thing, but we can apologize for that. We can't apologize for not getting involved in something getting worse on its own. But generally, we are not going to make things worse if we are there to help and support. Okay, so There are a couple things that we want to keep in mind. We want to do things in private. We don't necessarily want to go into the lunchroom and say, okay, Matthew, I've noticed XYZ with you. Are you the victim of violence? We need to maintain confidentiality. We need to do things to make people feel comfortable disclosing the information to us. Um, we also want to name the abuse. We don't want to validate the abuse. For instance, oh, well, why did you spend all that money and cause him to abuse you? Really, there is no excuse for abuse, regardless of what I do, provided I'm not being violent with someone. Now, I can disagree with my partner. I can have a fight with my partner. Does that give them the right to hit me or abuse me in other ways? No. So we can name the abuse. And we need to make sure they know it's not their fault, that we believe them. Because that's one of the things that often abusive partners talk about, is that nobody will believe you. We can go to the next slide. Some people wonder and they think, okay, I'm not a professional. And that's okay. You don't need to be a professional. You just need to be someone that cares and maybe knows how to start a conversation and how to refer someone to resources. You don't have to be an expert on domestic and intimate partner violence to help someone. It's really important to um, let them know that you're there, that you care, that you're worried about them. It's also important not to tell a victim what they should do. We need to remember that these are adults, that they have the ability to make their own decisions. They might need to know what information is out there to help them make a decision. And it also might not be the right time for them to make a decision. They are the experts on their own situation. So if they're not ready to leave a situation when we think they should, and we tell them you need to leave, now if they don't and we've told them that, okay, great. Now they've disappointed us because we told them what they should do. They didn't do it, so they're probably not going to come back to us for help down the road if they need it. Sometimes victims stay with abusive partners because that's the only way they can monitor what's going on. They actually feel safer knowing what their partner's kind of level of anger and abuse are. So it is not our decision. We shouldn't tell people what they should do, but we can let them know if this is not the right time, if they don't want to talk about it right now. I'm here for you when you're ready. I can find you resources when you're ready. We're not going to force them to have that conversation if they're not ready for it. We might take the opportunity to maybe put up some posters in the bathroom where there's numbers for transition houses or domestic violence outreach workers, where someone could access that information privately. But it is a very complicated situation. We can go to the next slide. So the conversation, really, the easiest way to start the conversation is to express your concern. I'm worried about you. I've noticed XYZ, and I'm worried about you. Sometimes we don't have the answers. We can say, I'm worried about you. Let me know how I can help. What do you need to feel safer? We don't have to know the answers. We just need to be able to connect with them and hopefully connect them with other resources. If we go to the next slide, and things to avoid. So, avoid telling people what they should do, avoid confronting them, particularly in front of other people, and avoid judging them. Sometimes we say things that we don't mean to be insulting. Like, well, I wouldn't let someone abuse me. So now you're telling them that, oh, it's your fault. You're letting someone abuse you. And really, no victim lets their partner abuse them. Oh, you're stupid if you stay. No, like, although we don't mean it in that way, that's how a victim might take it. And then they might not come back to us for help because I think they let their partner abuse them and I think they're stupid. Okay. I'm not really going to talk about the next slide about being hesitant to get involved. I think I addressed that a little bit with the fact that it's not being nosy is because you're concerned about someone. You don't need to be an expert in it to be able to start the conversation and link someone up to help. Okay. So, here's a little video that we have that kind of shows it all how to put it into practice. So if we can play that video, Matthew, that would be great.
Alex, I'm worried about you. You're a great worker, but lately you seem distracted.
Is it okay to talk about my personal problems at work?
If you tell me what's wrong, maybe I can help.
I didn't want to bring it up at work, but my partner is hurting me at home.
That's so hard to believe.
Does my boss think I'm lying?
How do you put up with this?
Does he think it's my fault?
You should leave your partner.
If only it were that easy.
Alex, I'm worried about you. You know, you're a great worker, but lately you seem distracted. If you tell me what's wrong, maybe I can help.
I didn't want to bring it up at work, but my partner is hurting me at home.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like to talk about it?
Is there any point in talking about this at work?
You know, we have policies that can help keep you safe at work.
It would be such a relief to feel safe while I'm here.
Look, here's a list of resources for people dealing with domestic violence. I'm here to listen anytime, okay? You're not alone.
Maybe there is hope.
So you can see quite a difference when people respond in a very non-judgmental way. And how a victim responds to that and can open up and not think, oh, do they think I'm stupid? Is it my fault? So it's really important to be able to do that. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. And practice the conversation. We're not going to do this today, but I really encourage people to think about how you might approach someone and say, hey, Matthew, I'm really worried about you. I've noticed X, Y, Z. Even if you say it exactly like that, I encourage you to actually say it because we get better with everything with practice. And it is very uncomfortable at first to be able to approach someone and ask them about domestic violence or what's going on in their life. It can be very uncomfortable. So I encourage you to say it out loud, practice it, think of different scenarios. Um, there's a couple imagined scenarios uh, in the PowerPoint that you can think, oh, if this happened at my work, what would I do? What would I say? So it will make it easier if it ever happens in reality. So now I want to talk a little bit about safety and safety planning at work. So there are many different things. We can go one more slide. Many different things that we can do at work to help enhance someone's safety. So there are personal safety plans that there are professionals that can do those, and it's free for people to do, from transition houses, domestic violence outreach, second stage housing, um, many people that work at Sexual Violence New Brunswick and other sexual violence services, different counselors and whatnot. They can do that personal safety planning. But a workplace safety plan really is about your workplace, what you can do within that workplace to enhance safety. So you can make sure that you provide information and resources to the individual. You can discuss their personal safety and security and what might impact it at work. For instance, has their partner been waiting outside the door? Have they been following them home or to their new, safer location? So there's different things that you might want to think about that will be specific to that individual, like entrances and exits. Can somebody walk somebody out? Is there a commissionaire? Is there a place someone can park that might be more well lit than way back in a parking lot or in a parkade or something like that? There's things like screening calls. So maybe someone doesn't have direct access. They have to call the reception first to be put through to somebody. Maybe it's screening emails. It could be taking someone's name out of the directory so they don't have access to the contact information. It could be having having different work schedules. Does someone have to work 8:15 to 4:30? Could they have an alternate work schedule? Maybe one that's not consistent every day. Maybe they're able to work from a different location. That can definitely help. If it's somebody that their office or their desk is close to the front door, maybe for a period of time they could be moved somewhere else so someone doesn't walk in and have immediate access to them. Maybe somebody needs to take DIPV or sexual violence leave. That maybe there needs to be notification. Maybe it's somebody's photo that needs to be given to the commissioner that says this person is not allowed in this building. Maybe someone needs to receive a notice of trespass that they're not welcome on that property. Maybe there's something about restraining orders or emergency intervention orders or no contact orders that prevent the partner from being there. If we go to the next slide. Oh, one more, sorry. Sometimes the abusive partner and the victim work together. It's really important to make sure the abusive partner does not have access to the victim. It's also important to make sure the abusive partner is not using company time or company assets to perpetrate that abuse against their partner. And it's also important to use disciplinary disciplinary processes for bad behavior at the workplace. That if somebody else, yelled or abused another employee, how would that be handled? We shouldn't handle this differently just because they're partners. It's still unacceptable. But we also need to recognize that there are other risks involved there. So it's important that they don't have access to them. Okay, I just want to go, might be one or two more slides. Okay, this one. Okay, zero tolerance. Okay, in my heart, I want to say an abusive partner needs to be fired from their job. That's what I think. They shouldn't have a job there. That's it. However, I recognize that an absolute zero tolerance policy isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. So this problem is going to exist regardless of whether or not they work there. If someone is fired from their employment, it can actually increase the risks for domestic homicide or severe reassault because now that person would be unemployed. It also may mean they have less access to supports like counseling or whatnot because they've lost their work benefits. I'm not saying that someone needs to keep someone, but I'm just saying that it doesn't always fix things to fire someone. And I'm not saying that tolerance is the answer either. I think it's something that you need to think about. I think it's something that you need to weigh the risks and what has happened. And it may be an area that you want to get specific legal advice on as well, but also keeping in mind those risks to the victims. Okay, so I've covered much of this stuff. I want to show you a quick video on safety planning. And there we go. It just gives you a little better idea.
Thanks for telling me about the restraining order you have against your partner. Let's chat about what we can do to make you feel safe at work.
My partner calls me at work a lot. It scares me.
We can arrange to screen your calls. And should we change your emergency contact to someone other than your partner?
Yes. Please use my friend Chris. Sometimes I get nervous walking to my car alone.
We'll get security to walk you to your car. Would you like a parking spot closer to the building?
That would help me feel safer too.
You work near the main entrance. It would be safer to move you to a different area.
Thank you.
So this is the restraining order, right? I'm going to share this with security.
Okay, but does that mean everyone will know?
This will be kept confidential. Only those who need to know for safety reasons will be told.
What should I do if my partner threatens to come here and hurt me?
We have a workplace safety plan to deal with threats of violence. Let's go over it.
Okay, and if we go to the next slide. So in our DIPV in the Workplace Toolkit, which can be found at this website, there is a workplace safety plan. So not everything is going to apply to your workplace, but it gives you some ideas of what you want to think about, what you want to ask. And remember, this is a victim safety plan. This isn't what we think should happen. They really need to be involved with the planning of it. And it should be revisited on a fairly regular basis. We can go to the next slide. So there's some other tools, and if we look one more, I think it's resources. So we have some resources in here, including Public Legal Education and Information Service of New Brunswick, a great resource for everyone to have. And then you will notice for the next couple of slides, there's some resources like we have transition houses, outreach services, and second stage housing, which are useful resources for individuals. I'm not going to summarize from the next slide, so we can go up, I think, 3 slides. Okay. And if we go to, okay, if we go forward, and forward, I think 2 more maybe. There we go. So where can I find more information? So if we go to the next slide, this is our toolkit. It's online. It's free to access. You can print things out. We have fact sheets on a number of different things. You can go to the next slide. You'll also see along the top, there's a piece for training that, again, is free online training. We can go to the next slide. So it talks about the fact sheets that are there. The videos are available there as well. And you'll find all sorts of different resources. And then you will find how to follow us, how to find us. And on the last slide, there is a QR code to take you directly to the training piece, as well as all of the partners that are involved with the DIPV and the Workplace Toolkit, which is a committee that has existed for many years, since I want to say 2005. It might have been launched initially, and it's been updated. So we used to be housed at the Muriel McQueen Ferguson Center for Family Violence Research. It's a combination of academics, government, community partners, and we're really happy that Public Legal Education is going to be now managing the toolkit for us. So if you're interested in either more training or more information, you're welcome to contact the toolkit or go directly to the training. And Matthew will share the slides with you in a PDF version. And I think we have we have 7 minutes in case anyone has any questions.
That was such a great presentation, Lindsay. Thank you so much. And what a pro, like coming in under the wire, like right on time, like very much appreciated, I'm sure. So I'll read out any comments that anyone would like to toss into the chat. Again, if you would like to ask a question verbally, use the raise hand function. I can allow you to unmute your mic. I will vamp for a minute to allow people to decide if they're frantically typing something out for Lindsay to answer. We've got some very nice thank yous coming in to the chat for you, Lindsay. People are very appreciative.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you folks were here. And also, don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions about anything I said today. Maybe Matthew could share my email in the chat.
I can absolutely do that. And I will, pardon me, in the coming days, what I can also do is I will, like Lindsay said, I'll be sharing the PDF. I'll share it to the list of attendees today. So I'll grab your email address from the Zoom list and I'll email this out to everyone.
Perfect. And then if you copy me on that, if you BCC the participants and copy me, then they'd have my email address if they'd like it.
That would be great. I'll make sure I include that as well. And I am just copying your email address right now into the chat. So there it is right there. So I don't see any other questions coming through, Lindsay. Just a lot of thank yous coming in the chat.
Well, my pleasure. I'm sorry I feel like I rushed through the last little bit, but I think I hit most of the highlights that I wanted to cover. But you will find more information in our toolkit and the online training.
Wonderful. And I did share the links to the URLs to the toolkit in the chat while you were presenting as well.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I don't see any questions coming through, so enjoy your day. Don't forget, tomorrow is day 2 of the Respectful Workplaces Forum, so that's a full day event. And then on Friday, if you're interested in seeing me specifically again, I will be delivering our Safer Places training for addressing workplace sexual harassment from the employee perspective. So I'll be doing that at 10 a.m. on Friday. So you can find the registration link where you found the registration link for this one on our website, legalinfonb.ca. And yeah, I hope everyone's having a great week. I hope that you're learning lots. I hope that the content is working well for you, and have a great time. And thank you very much again, Lindsay. This is so much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Great. Bye, everyone.